Hi guys, Dr. Wendy Dearborne here from foodbeyonditsnutrition.com, and do I have a dish for you today. This is a ricotta gnocchi. Absolutely delicious in a spicy masala wine cream sauce. Guys, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button, and every time I upload a video, you will be notified. But guys, let's get to it. Okay, guys, here we have the star of the show, which is the ricotta. It's the ricotta cheese. Well, and I've got a pound of that. It was too wet. So what I did was I put it in some cheesecloth, put it in a strainer, put it in a bowl so the whey could drain off. And I did that in the refrigerator overnight. And here's what we got, the ricotta. I have about 10 ounces of flour here. And in addition to that, I have my third cup of Parmesan cheese. I have an egg and I have some salt. Now, all these things are going to go, we're going to make the dough, although I won't be using all of the flour. And that's really important to note. I also have a couple of cookie sheets here, which I have lined with parchment paper. And I'm going to dust those with flour so that once I have cut the gnocchi, I can put the gnocchi onto the actual onto the cookie trays and then put them in the freezer so I can bag up the gnocchi and they won't be all clumped together. I'm using my handy dandy pastry or bench scraper, if you will, and I'll use that to cut the gnocchi. And I also have this board. It will actually put some ridges in the gnocchi, and I'll show you. I'm going to roll the cut pieces down. But anyway, guys, let us get ready to start this process. I'm going to make a well in the ricotta cheese, and you need a bowl that's big enough to do this. So I'm going to make a well, and I'm going to put the egg directly into the little well that I have made, because I'm going to mix the cheese and the egg together first. I'm going to give it a little pinch of salt, guys, and I mean a little pinch of salt. It's important to understand that the cheese is actually salty. And here I'm breaking up the egg, and then I'm just gently mixing it in. Now, of course, you can do this and put the flour in and the egg in and dump it all in. For me, I have a bit more control when I do it this way. So I'm going to mix it in fairly well so it's fairly well incorporated. And then I'm going to start adding the flour. Okay, guys, I'm going to add some flour. I'm going to add maybe about 2/3 of what I've got in my measuring jug. I want the dough to be a nice soft dough. I don't want it to be hard, and neither do I want it to be dry and flaky. This is really important. And so it's about finding the right texture of dough. So I'm going to use the fork to mix, and eventually you'll see I'll turn it out on the table. But right here, I'm going to test the dough to see how well it comes together. It's still actually really very wet. It might not look it, but it's really wet, and it's very, very, very soft. So I'm going to add some more flour and mix that in, and you're going to see a little later on I realized why my dough was doing what it was doing, because I hadn't actually added the cheese. And it came to me because I'm feeling the dough, and I'm like, this is it just didn't feel right. You got that finger touch. It just didn't feel right. And then it dawned on me, it hit me, because I said, okay, I need some more flour. And in reality, I didn't. What I needed was the Parmesan cheese. And so I'm adding the cheese here, and it was like an aha moment. It was like, oh, yeah, right. Now I got it. Now it feels right. Well, the dough came out perfectly, even though I think for me, I added just a tad too much flour, but the dough came out perfectly. And so I'm going to mix the cheese in, and then I'm going to turn the dough out onto a floured surface. And here I'm just flouring my clean and sanitized countertop. And I'm going to turn the dough out, give it a quick knead. Okay, here's the dough. It's nice, it's soft. You can see still a little tad sticky, which is okay because we're going to be using flour as we move along. Give it a little knead, and then we're going to start the process of cutting. Okay, guys, I actually said that we would start cutting the gnocchi straight away, but that's not true. I'm going to allow it to sit between 20 and 30 minutes, and this will allow the actual flour for me to become really hydrated and allow everything to marry together, if you will. Now, you can put it in a bowl, back into the bowl, and cover it with saran wrap or a damp towel. What I choose to do is to invert the bowl on top of it. I put more flour down and invert the bowl on top of it, and I'm going to leave it on the counter for about 25 to 30 minutes. And actually, guys, it was 27 minutes. It really does feel different. There's a marked difference. You can tell the hydration. You can tell that the flour is more hydrated and everything's come together nicely. So I'm going to spread some more flour out. I'm going to give it a quick knead just to wake everything up and, make sure that it's all together in the way that I want it. The dough feels really, really good. It's not sticky. It's not tough. It's not flaky. It's nice. It's soft, but together. So I'm actually going to cut this into 4 equal or equalish pieces. So I'm going to cut the dough into 4 pieces. Now, I will say this, you can cut the dough into however many pieces that you want. The name of the game is that you are in control of the dough. Do not let the dough control you. Now we're getting ready to make some really long ropes. And once we've made our ropes, and we're going to roll that across the table. And once we've made our ropes, we will then start cutting the actual rope into our gnocchi. Once again, you control the dough. Don't allow the dough to control you. You're using your fingers and the palms of your hands, or you're using your fingers and the palms of your hands. And as you roll, you're gently stretching outwards. Once the dough's actually reached your desired thickness, or the rope that you've created has reached your desired thickness, then you're going to actually start cutting it. And you can use a knife, or I'm using my bench scraper here. Make sure that the blade end is floured so it doesn't stick. And it's really important to cut the gnocchi into equal sized portions. And there you saw me re-roll a little bit. It was a little chubby, it was a little fat. But that being said, you need to cut them into equal size portions so that they cook at the same rate. That's really important. Otherwise, you'll have some that's cooked, some that's not cooked, and so it goes on. Now I'm going to use my new little paddle, and I'm actually going to make my grooves and my divots onto the gnocchi. And what that does is it creates a little well or a little dimple for the sauce to be caught in, and it allows the sauce, the actual ridges on the end, allows the sauce to wrap around it. Now, you need to make sure that you dip this in flour, or the cut gnocchi into flour before you start to form the ridges. Otherwise, it's going to actually stick onto the paddle. You can use a fork, which is what I used to use, which is what I normally use. And same thing, you press and roll. Try not to stab the gnocchi, which I did there. Some people use the front of the fork, which is what I'm using here. And that's typically what I would use, is the front of the fork. And again, you press and you roll. Some people use the back, like I'm showing here, and it's just the same thing. You press and you roll. You're looking to create those ridges. You're looking to create that little dimple in the middle so the sauce it just makes it really nice. Now I'm going to put the prepared gnocchi onto a floured tray. And once again, that needs to be in a single layer. And I'm going to continue rolling and cutting. Another method for doing this is actually to use a rolling pin. I typically don't use this method, but there are some people who do this. And so we're just going to roll the actual dough out. Make sure you have enough flour, not only on your surface, but on your rolling pin. And you roll your dough out to the desired thickness that you want, the desired thickness that you can work with. And then you cut it into fairly large strips. And from there, what you're going to do is to create that whole sausage effect. You're going to start rolling. And for me, this way for me is a little bit more difficult. But for some people, it's easier because it gives them more control over the dough and making or forming that rope. So once that's done, again, we're going to roll, and then we're going to actually cut those pieces. And you can see that this particular rope is a lot skinnier than the first rope that I made. One of the things that I should have mentioned is when using the rolling pin method, you usually cut the dough in half and roll, or you roll the whole thing out. You don't cut it into quarters. But here, guys, again, I'm cutting the dough with the bench scraper. And again, as you can see, these are way smaller. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to divide these up into the smaller and skinnier batch, and then, of course, the chunkier batch that I had made. And one last thing before we move to the next segment, it's important that you control the dough. Make sure that you divide the dough up into manageable pieces. Okay, here's the gnocchi cut and on a cookie sheet that has parchment paper and dusted with flour. I'm going to cook some and I'm going to freeze some. The gnocchi that I'm going to freeze, I'm making sure that none of them are touching, and that way you can put them into a Ziploc bag. You can portion it out and put it into a Ziploc bag. Now, when it comes to cooking from frozen, all you need to do, you don't have to defrost it, just put the gnocchi into boiling water. Okay, guys, I have a 6-quart Dutch oven here filled with water, and I'm putting some avocado oil, some salt. You can use olive oil. I'm actually going to bring this pot to a hard boil, a rolling boil. Now, once that's achieved, I'm going to put the gnocchi into the boiling water, and it's a lot like pasta, guys. So I'm going to put it into the boiling water. I'm going to give it a quick stir so nothing is sticking together and or to the bottom of the pot, and I'm going to bring it up again to another rolling boil. When the gnocchi start to surface, when they start to float, which is what's happening here, they are done and you can actually remove them. Once the gnocchis come to the surface and it's floating, as I said, you remove it. They don't always all come up to the surface at the same time. So you keep cooking until they've all come up to the surface, and then you'll remove them. I'm putting mine into a bowl because I'm going to actually fry them off with some oil. Here I have some avocado oil that I have seasoned with garlic and some thyme. I've infused the oil. And I'm actually going to fry the gnocchi, particularly on one side, until it's golden. So I'm going to put it into the pan and I'm going to leave it alone until it starts to turn golden. Once it turns the golden brown, and you'll see here, this is the kind of color I'm looking for. Once it's turned to golden brown, I'm going to actually flip all the gnocchi over and cook briefly. I don't want the other side as brown. I'm just going to cook it briefly. And what happens, the outside's really crispy and crunchy, and the inside is all pillowy and soft. So once that's all done, which it's pretty much nearly done here, I'm going to put the gnocchi in the sauce that I have created. That took about 4 minutes for it to brown. Here's the serving plate with a nice helping of pesto in the bottom. I'm going to pile the gnocchi, the fried gnocchi, on top of the pesto. And here I'm spooning over that delicious spicy masala wine sauce. It's a creamy sauce. It's absolutely delicious. It needs a little color, so I'm putting some halved cherry tomatoes around it. And to make it really pop, here's some roughly chopped parsley. Guys, this is it. No, I lied, because I'm going to put a little bit of Parmesan cheese on top to finish it off. And guys, this is it. Ricotta gnocchi in a spicy masala wine cream sauce. For this recipe and more, guys, please check me out at foodbeyonditsnutrition.com.